Good morning. I'd like to welcome you here to Dr. Harrold's memorial service. As we begin, let me read to you a passage of Scripture from the book of Revelation. And then I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among his people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." He who was seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." Then he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." He said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the springs of the water of life. And those who are victorious," I love this promise, "and those who are victorious will inherit all of this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children." Today we gather to say goodbye to a truly inspiring person. Dr. Leslie Harrold was always an inspiration to those around her. Today, as we gather as her family and her friends, we desire not to focus on her death, but rather to celebrate her life and to truly celebrate the legacy that Dr. Harrold has left to those of us who knew her, who worked beside her, and those who loved her. For years, there was a poster that hung in her office at Union Hospital. It was the story of two wolves, and I want to share this little story with you as we begin. One evening, an old Cherokee told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside of people. He said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside all of us. One is evil. It is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, sincerity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" The old Cherokee simply replied, "The one you feed." My friends, that's how Dr. Harrold lived her life, challenging others to grow and to work hard in all they do. And today, we remember that legacy that she has left to each and every one of us. I would like to call Norm Mass to come and share some memories about her legacy.
I know it's probably not going to stay. So, morning. I'm Norm Mast. I am the CEO. I have the honor of being the CEO here at Community Hospice. And when I was first asked to share about the legacy that Dr. Harrold has brought to the organization, I honestly was, I didn't feel like I was the right person to do that. I've only been here 11 years. Dr. Harrold has volunteered for this organization for more than 33 years. So she did so much more before I even came. Not that she didn't do more, didn't continue to work with us, but so she was here from the beginning. And I just thought, like, there's no way that I really know enough about her to be able to do it justice. So I started talking to people and started asking them, tell me a little bit about Dr. Harrold. I had my own perception of her and what she brought to the organization and things that she had done. And I knew she'd been here a long time. But I started really talking to staff who knew her. One of the things that I spoke with Lois Andrews, who was one of our founders of the organization, and I asked her about, tell me about how it all came about. Talk to me about Dr. Harrold and how you came to have her as being a part of the organization. And she said, she said, we had 2 other medical directors with the organization prior to Dr. Harrold. And she said they lasted about 3 to 6 months each, weren't really involved in the organization at all, and just really struggled with understanding hospice and understanding what it was. She said, so one day somebody suggested that she contact or go see Dr. Harrold, that she might be somebody who might be interested. She said, I went to her office at Union Hospital, we sat down, and we started talking, and she said, the minute that I sat down with her and started talking to her about it, she said, I knew she was the one. She said, she had that hospice heart. No matter, she said, she could just tell that she was going to be the one that was going to help lead the organization through the growth and everything else that we had. So, she also, the other thing that she talked about was that she had gotten there's a butterfly out there that Dr. Harrold made. By the way, you can see how talented she was by everything that she has here. And one of the things that she did was she created these stained glass butterflies. And the story behind that, this is the heart of Dr. Harrold. And so I'm just going to read the story that she wrote about this. I have been a hospice volunteer for several years, and in the course of my work, I meet many of the patients and their families. Early in my time with hospice, I had the honor of meeting a very pleasant young man and his family. The patient, like so many of our patients, was an exceptional young man with remarkable courage and fortitude. Unfortunately, I only had the opportunity to meet this gentleman as he was dying, but the stories his family told of him and the way the entire family interacted gave me real insight into how special all of them were. The patient had cancer, which had baffled the experts for several years, and while certain therapies had slowed its progression, they were unable to stop or reverse the process. When he died, the entire family was with him, and his wife made a statement which gave me much to think about. She said that when he died, she envisioned him as a beautiful butterfly ascending into the light. I have had many occasions to think about this statement and its meaning for the family as well as to myself. I made butterflies in many different materials and of many kinds before I finally found both pleasure and peace in designing a butterfly in stained glass. The butterflies are made of many different stained glasses which allow the light to scatter in many patterns. I continue to make the butterflies as a form of internal balance for myself. Many times I select the colors or cut different glasses when reflecting on or thinking about the families and patients I am dealing with. For me, each one of the butterflies contains many memories and lives. So she was, in the years that I knew her and that she worked with community hospice, the one thing I knew about her was that she cared deeply for the patients, the families, and our staff. She was always concerned about how our staff was doing. She would ask questions about, or she'd be worried about how overworked they were or how they were doing. I heard stories about nurses telling me that when they'd call in and talk to her, she'd be asking them about how they're doing, how's it going, what's going on. She took call from home, even when she was not doing well in her bed. She would take call at night during the day because she didn't want the other doctors to be overworked. She felt she was one of the most selfless giving people that I've ever known. She did it even sometimes to her own detriment, and that's what she gave until she couldn't give anymore. So and when I look at the history, or what does legacy mean? It's a gift that's handed down from the past, and she truly gave of herself and gave those gifts to this organization in so many ways that I can't even explain. Like I said, we started out back in 1986. Next year will be our 35th year, and she was a part of that for 33 years, all the way up until the end. A couple weeks before she passed, she was still doing volunteer work and still talking to Summer and Sue about patients and doing coding and helping with things. She did that from where she was, wherever she was doing that. She insisted on continuing that work. And to be honest, I mean, she was good at it. She knew what she was doing. She was one of the most talented, and I say she's nothing short of being a genius, and I think she truly was such a gifted person. The you know, I talk about there's a wall hanging out there that she also did for one of our patients and one of our staff members in honor of them, and those are the kind of things that she just people touched her life, and she would create different things to remember those people by. You know, so Dr. Harrold, that's how I know her, and that's from the minute I started, that's what it was Dr. Harrold. Dr. Harrold. I didn't know her by Leslie. I didn't know her by Dr. Leslie Harrold. I just knew her as Dr. Harrold. And to begin with, when I started here, she had some health problems, so she was kind of an enigma to me. I had heard all about her, but I didn't see her for quite a while. Then when I was introduced to her, I was like, okay, Dr. Harrold. Now it all makes sense. I understand. And talking to her, she had a very quiet, gentle spirit about her, and but she was a feisty. I think that's a good word for her. Feisty. Yeah, she was feisty. So the stories that I would hear from staff about the call that they had that night before, and how she was never upset with staff, but she would be upset with how patients had been treated prior to coming onto hospice, and she'd be upset about the family not doing what they're supposed to be doing and not giving the medications, and she almost, I'm going to say, belligerent at times, to where she was just like, why in the world are they not doing, you know, they're causing harm to this patient. So the eternal patient advocate she was. In closing, I'm just going to talk a little bit about So Summer and Sue used to come, over the last couple of years, used to come into the office here once or twice a week and go over the coding and do stuff like that. And Summer started writing down what we call Harroldisms. And they're just things that Dr. Harrold would say that you just kind of sit there and shake your head and go, okay, that's, not sure what that means, but we're going to go with it. So I'm just going to read a couple of them. So some of them are, yeah, I'm just going to read them. So the first one says, adios, yo-yo, you're on your own. When you're up to your ass in alligators, it's hard to remember your original intention is to drain the swamp. Some of them I can't read. I'm just not going to. Even if I could write a book, I probably shouldn't. This is like catching clouds. Skin serums are bullshit. There are better ways to make yourself beautiful. February is the armpit of the year. She mentioned this as one, need to change partners and dance again. And she was referring to getting new windshield wipers on her car. She asked, I guess this is a question, is it raining yet? The sheep are lying down. Anyways, so there's a whole list of them here. Like I said, some of them are just not appropriate for me to read. But she was just an interesting person. Can I just say that? Just a very interesting person. And she deserves everything that we're saying about her today. She left a legacy to this organization, and we're here today. We're here in this pavilion today because of what she did, and everything that she's done over the years, and the gifts that she gave are long-standing. You see what we've got here. So all I can say is thank you for allowing her and giving her to us to have over those years. I know you maybe didn't have anything to do with it. She's probably your own person, and she's going to do what she wanted to do. But thank you for sharing her with us over the last 33 years.
Those of us who are vertically challenged have to make adjustments. Maybe you can hear me better. I'm Linda Zaleski. I was honored to be one of Les's close friends. And so I get to share some observations, some stories of our time together, which lasted for many, many years. I first met Les in 1994 as a client when she assumed the practice of Dr. Bob Hasted. And she became the head of pathology at Union Hospital at that time. We administered from KeyBank, we administered the profit sharing plan, and so occasionally, a couple times a year, I would meet with Les. First time I went in her office was, she had to clear papers off so I could sit on the one chair that was at least visible in her office. Yes, she wasn't the typical physician that you think about. But in about 1997, 98, she asked me if I would be interested in serving on the finance committee of Hospice of Tuscarawas County. And I didn't really know too much about it at the time, so of course I said yes. My fate was sealed. That was it. I am still on the board and was privileged to actually serve as board chair twice, once during the rather arduous journey of creating the hospice house. It wasn't long in my association with Les that I learned that she was a quilter. And when I retired from the bank in '07, I asked her if she knew someone who could restore quilts. I had a quilt that my daughter Allison, who is here today, had created with her 6th grade class in the bicentennial year, and it had gotten well used over the years, so it needed some major restoration. Les's famous line, and this echoes in my ears and will forever, said, "We can do it." That was her attitude. Well, 3 years and endless hours later, I finally finished that patriotic star quilt, and I have never, ever forgotten how she got me into it. But I was hooked on quilting too. Cats. Okay, you couldn't be around Les very long until you recognized that she was a cat lover. And I mean a real cat lover. I, on the other hand, was an avoider of cats. Never had one, didn't like them, actually had a fear of touching them. So you can imagine my frame of mind the first time when I met with her at her home. 5 house cats. 5. I was freaking out. But of course I couldn't tell her that I was freaking out. But fortunately, her cats only liked Les's lap, not mine. So I survived my first trip and many hundreds after that, and eventually lost my aversion for the feline species. My life partner summed it up at the time. He said, "Hell has frozen over. Linda now owns a cat and has a cat door." Actually, I now have 2 cats, and I like them, and they even like me. Like her real dedication for hospice, she passed her passion for quilting on to me, and our quilting sessions grew into a weekly routine. Mitch Albom may have had Tuesdays with Maury, but I had Mondays with Les. My family always knew where I would be on Monday mornings, and I'd show up about 9, coming through the kitchen with my usual "Good morning, Les," carrying the 2 large Diet Cokes that I would always pick up for us at McDonald's. Diet Coke, you hear that? Coke, not Pepsi. No Pepsi for Les. Les and I were confirmed Coke aficionados. I knew I wouldn't be able to say that word. Aficionados, thank you. She would answer with a "Good morning, Linda," from her recliner in the living room, and would offer her left wrist to me. There's a story to this. You see, I would always wrap our Diet Cokes with napkins so they wouldn't sweat on our quilting projects. And she would always give me 2 rubber bands. They were always on her left wrist. And I would take the 2 rubber bands and prepare our Diet Cokes for our quilting session. If she hadn't eaten breakfast, which sometimes happened, I would prepare her breakfast: 6 or 8 cherry tomatoes, 2 radishes, and 1 piece of dry toast. Whew, yum. It was her typical breakfast. Ask anybody who knew her. Sometimes I would bring eggs from my daughter Allison's chickens. Sometimes I would bring dinner for her and Carol. But always I brought my trusty tote with my quilting supplies and the current project that I was working on, and she would work on one of hers. Now, another thing about Les was a bag lady. Now, I say that with reverence because I'm a bag lady, okay? You have a bag for everything. Every project has a bag. Every purchase has a bag. Every craft has multiple bags. So she would have her bag, and I would have mine, and we would spend the morning quilting. During the last few years, her ability to work with her hands declined. And so our Mondays became more of a conversation session than a quilting time. And I would perch on her rollator in front of her recliner and relate my adventures for the week. And of course, I'd embellish adventures because she liked hearing the stories. She knew my family by name, and of course she knew my cats. And my family certainly knew Les. Les had an enormous inventory of fabric. There is no such thing as too much fabric, okay? And we would spend some Mondays looking at piece after piece, tote after tote, with Les enjoying the memories and me enjoying the stories of where and why she bought it. She shared her stash with her good friends, Ann Harper, Marlene Taschuti, and myself, and donated literally hundreds of yards of fabric to the Hospice Browse and Buy resale store. If you knew her well, you would also know that she was a voracious reader, which you probably read in her obituary. Not just avid, way past avid. Unlike many of us who have a favorite genre in reading, she covered them all. Her personal library contained, and still contains, thousands, yes, I said thousands of books on every topic you can imagine. Nonfiction and fiction, covering topics from medical to humor, nature to history, craft making to social issues. It was all there. I would frequently ask what she was reading at the time, and I would expect just about anything. Like the time she recommended, and I have to read this, The Hidden Brain, How Our Unconscious Minds Elect Presidents, Control Markets, Wage Wars, and Save Our Lives. I read it. A very interesting book, actually. When I put together puzzles, I always start with the edge pieces. I don't know about you, but I always want the edge pieces first. They seem to frame the final picture and are essential to completion. Les was one of my edge pieces, helping to bound the puzzle of my life. She was my friend, my mentor, my inspiration. She taught me a very important lesson to live by. The meaning of life is to find your gift. And you, Les, had a myriad of gifts. The purpose of life is to give it away. And that you did in spades. Rest lightly, my friend. I hope someday our spirits collide out there in the cosmos.
Well, first I'd like to say there is not enough thanks in the world for what hospice does. Angels reside here, they really do. Her last weeks were so much better because of hospice. My friend Leslie, she wants me to call her Leslie always. We've known each other for nearly 50 years. Leslie was a character, as we are all characters, and as within any group that we put into categories. Oh.
Talking to the mic a little, you're not quite coming through.
Oh.
Sorry to interrupt.
All right. Leslie was a character, as we are all characters, and as with any group that we put into categories, there are standouts, and Leslie was certainly a standout. The world is full of intelligent people. Leslie was a brilliant standout. She was eloquently articulate, amazingly perceptive, and tolerant. She had a generous, educated heart. My legacy from Leslie is that friendship is a privilege. A component of that privilege was absolute, hermetically sealed confidentiality. Any secrets that any of us trusted to Leslie were hermetically sealed in her heart, and they're with her now. Many of us here remember Leslie's mother, her sainted mother. Well, she's not a saint, she's certainly canonized to be one by now. Mrs. Harrold told me that when Leslie learned to crawl, she crawled backwards, full speed, all over the house. Then when she learned to walk, Leslie had to be kept on a leash because she would quickly be out of sight exploring the whole world. So then as an adult, Leslie had a certain friend, that would be me. There were times when Mrs. Harrold said, "The two of you together are not worth a nickel." An example of it is this. It was an evening before going on a road trip. Leslie and I were going to pick up some supplies from the pharmacy hardware store, and as we were leaving, Mrs. H said, "Don't forget to wash the van." Well, we forgot, and then when we returned, we remembered as we pulled into the driveway. We opened the garage, we saw 2 buckets of water and a pile of rags. So we each picked up a bucket and rags and began washing the van all over with what seemed to be soapy water. Rain was predicted for the night to overnight, so we thought that would make a good rinse. Well, the next morning, we were awakened. We were awakened by Mrs. Harrold's panicked, "What did you do to my van?" And so here we went out to the driveway, and the navy blue van was covered with whitish swirls and streaks all over. The water that we used was by the kitchen painters to clean their brushes of the interior latex paint. Leslie quickly called a friend, it might have been Ron Schutte, who advised her going through the car wash 2 times, which we did. It worked pretty well. That day, the 2 of us were not worth a penny between the 2 of you. So it always seemed we couldn't go anywhere where Leslie wasn't recognized. We were in the grocery store going down an aisle when just as we caught a whiff of manure and we heard a raspy old voice say, "Hey, Doc." And then this a buddy, all muddy booted and dirty overhauled farmer gentleman appeared. He leaned over the wheelchair and he kissed Leslie and gave her a big hug. He said, "You took good care of my old ball and chain, and I don't forget that." And Leslie said, "Oh, good to see you. How are things going with you?" He said, "Oh, hell, who lives to be 94? Then he said, "How about you? Did you ever marry and have little ones of your own?" Leslie said, "If I wanted to hear the pitter-patter of little feet, I would put shoes on my cats." There was a laughing and another hug, and then those barnyard aromas traveled all the way home with us in the car. Driving in the last 5 years, we racked up over 260,000 miles on my car. Our travels often resembled Thelma and Louise of the movie. Really, and we could have taught Thelma and Louise a thing or two. And our conversations were ongoing over the miles, and our adventures were, oh, so very many. Recently, I must admit that we often looked like bag ladies. I mean, almost all the time. And the wheelchair added an even kind of needier look, I think, because in this new pay-it-forward culture, we received many free meals. We would then tip the waitresses very well and would pay it forward for the next diners. It looks as though we are all at least semi-adult here, so I will refer to Leslie's world-class blasphemous cussing. When her hands were losing their dexterity while trying to see her beautiful trying to sew up her beautiful creations, she would sometimes be swearing up such a blue storm of profanity that it would seem as though the paint and varnish would peel off the ceiling and the chairs and furniture around her. And so then the phone would ring, and it might be one of the nurses, and the transformation from a swearing stevedore to kindly advisor was a study in contrasts. I often house sat for Leslie and her mom. Most people, when calling home to check on things, would probably say something like, "Well, how are my cats?" Leslie would call and say, "What are my obligate carnivores up to?" Or checking on her plants would ask, "How is the liquid amber styractiflua faring? Keep your eye on the fungus there." Or one time she said, "Only water the cacti if the weatherman says it is raining in Phoenix." Leslie's love of cats is legendary, and I know she is happy knowing that Angie Harper has been entrusted with her beloved black cat, Holly. Oh, thank you, thank you. That's so important to Leslie. Leslie was a friend to all of us, and I do believe she perceived us as better versions of ourselves, and that really uplifts us. Any conversation with her was always a supportive exchange. And I know, Leslie, that you are exuberantly enjoying the great cosmos. So if you're listening, we miss you, we thank you for the privilege of your friendship, and we're now missing your beautiful laugh. Your laugh was almost like a separate entity from you, and not hearing it now, I think we all feel like orphans. Where's Leslie's laughter? Thank you.
to you today, just like today. If I had a song that I could sing for you, I sing a song to make you feel this way. Sunshine on my shoulders makes me happy. Sunshine in my eyes can make me cry. Sunshine on the water looks so lovely. Sunshine almost always makes me high. If I had a tale that I could tell you, I'd tell a tale sure to make you smile. If I had a wish that I could wish for you, I'd make a wish for sunshine. Sunshine on my shoulders makes me happy. Sunshine in my eyes can make me cry. Sunshine on the water looks so lovely. Sunshine almost always makes me high. Sunshine almost all the time makes me high. Sunshine almost
Hello, my friends. Most of you know me. I'm Ann Harper. I wouldn't be at hospice if it weren't for Les. I wouldn't be much of a doc in many ways if it weren't for Les. I met Les in February of 1989. I was a new practitioner with a 3-month-old baby, trying to figure out how to be a mom and a doc and do right by everybody all the time and never make a mistake and never say the wrong thing the wrong way to the wrong people. And I met somebody who did that. It was very humbling. But my second month in practice, I saw a patient who was very into herbal medicine. And when you're in med school, you don't learn about that. At least you didn't back in the old days, and they were old days. I was enough to learn about pharmacology and biochemistry and histopathology and neuropathology and what the heck is an MRI anyway. But this lady was a wonderful human being. She was a quilter. And she couldn't quilt because she hurt so badly. And I put my fresh residency trained brain to work, and oh boy, I worked her up one side and down the other and couldn't find anything except an elevated count in her blood that was consistent with allergies. She had no symptoms of allergies, none whatsoever. So I thought the blood count was wrong. You know, machines aren't always right, and I went to pathology, to Les's office. And I knew I was in trouble when I got to the door, because again, you couldn't see the chair. There was one there, I know there was. And on the very corner of the desk was a stack of slides and cardboard holders that was very precariously looking as if it wished to test the laws of gravity. But the reason I didn't come in was on her windowsill. Les was a great believer in life and life in death. She had a taxidermy project there that many of you may remember. It was a very large cobra with a mongoose locked within its coils in a battle to the death. I wasn't sure I had the right office. Nevertheless, I went in, and with Les, the key is respect. She respected every living thing, every living being, every human being, unless they were evil, and we'll get to that in a minute. So I approached her, I said, I really don't understand the limitations of the test. I've got this lady, blah, 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 blah. And before I could finish, she said, well, she has Spanish oil syndrome, L-tryptophan contamination syndrome. I was like, what? She did what to who? And it had come out only a month before as an entity in the New England Journal of Medicine, how people who used homeopathic remedies were getting L-tryptophan over the counter to help them sleep. And some of it that came from Spain was contaminated with some toxic oils that produced eosinophilia myalgia syndrome, which meant that those white blood cells that were supposed to cause allergies crawled into the muscles and destroyed them. She knew that. Les is probably the only physician I ever met back in the day when reading medical journals was still widely practiced, that read not only the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, Annals of Internal Medicine, but also the British Medical Journal and Lancet. They're way ahead of us in many regards in Europe with regard to homeopathic remedies, and Les, for all her scientific genius, did not poo-poo people because they believed differently than she did. She didn't mock people who used homeopathic remedies. She made it her business to learn. Are they safe? Are they effective? Is this reasonable? Is this unreasonable? I saw Les irritated a heck of a lot. I saw her frustrated and annoyed. I'd say annoyance was pretty common for her. And she would comment about everybody getting all up in a hiss-growl circle. There are many other things she said, and again, I don't think I will repeat those. I will tell you that near the end, when she was struggling with some of her losses, one of our wonderful nurses in the unit knew that she was uncomfortable, and she said, you know, Dr. Harrold, you can fly us the bird if you want to. And both fingers came up, both of them. Boom, just like that. That attention to detail really sprang from her deep love for all that lived. For instance, you knew better than to give Les cut flowers because she considered them corpses. She didn't want you cutting the flowers. If you found one that had fallen or been damaged, and you could bring her that. She believed that every life had a purpose and a meaning, and that as a physician, you were a servant to that purpose and meaning. She was board certified not only in internal medicine, but also in pathology, and those of us who, if you know anything about internists, there's kind of a joke about us. They say we know everything and do nothing because we don't do many procedures, and pathologists know everything and do everything, they just do it a little too late. And that was kind of Les's take on it. She wanted the details. She wanted the biochemistry. She wanted the nitty-gritty. It wasn't enough for Les to know what to do. She wanted to know why. Why am I doing this? And is there a better way? And she never stopped questioning. You wanted to make Les truly angry, and Les was scary when she was angry. We talk a lot about her vocabulary and her mannerisms when she was upset. When she was angry, she was cold as ice. I think I saw it twice in the 34 years I knew her. She became very cold and very, very calm. If you hurt a patient, knowingly, willingly, or for profit, those last two words made her spit nails. and she would take you down. There was an individual in another institution who routinely treated individuals as lesser beings if they had Medicaid. She got his license revoked. She wasn't kidding. You do not play with people that way. Little people she wasn't sure what to do with, and we often went to Les's to do her yard work from the time my children were growing. She didn't know quite what to make of my younger two. Medically, they were an anomaly to her. They were very intelligent kids, and so she could speak to them as they were adults. But the minute she turned her back, they would be doing terrible things to one another. And she would do this. And they would stop right now. There was no but Mom, there was no but Les. It was, yes, ma'am. She set the bar so high. None of us can reach it. You know, you look at these quilts, and if you flip one, you'll see that the backside is as beautiful as the front. The attention to detail. I quilt. I'm a close enough is good enough kind of girl. The difference between our quilts is the difference in our handwriting. Those of you who are familiar with both our handwriting, you need say nothing. You know, and that was what her life was about in medicine. Miss nothing, harm no one. Above all, do good. When Sharon and the rest of us were kind of cleaning some stuff up, Sharon found some letters that Les had anticipated some time ago that her time on this earth might be short. I don't think Les was afraid, but Les was determined to die like she lived, and so this is a quote from something she left in one of the letters. Leslie wrote, "There are those who say there are 5 things that you should do before you die. 5 things that you should say. Droll person that I am, I would speak with them now. Please forgive me. I forgive you. Thank you. I love you. Goodbye."
I'm Leslie's sister, Sharon. Thank you for joining us to share our memories and to celebrate the life of Leslie. I have 72 years of stories of Leslie, but to keep it simple, I'm using the words she used in an interview to the Times reporter from 1989. Full name, Leslie S. Harrold. Age, chronologic, 40 years. Physiologic, occasionally up to 200 plus. Occupation, physician. I live in several worlds, being in both pathology and internal medicine. Additionally, our group works for several counties as coroner's pathologists, and I am a hospice volunteer as their medical director. Birthplace, Springfield, Ohio. Current home, Baltic, Ohio. Marital and family status, single, married to medicine. As I have no children, I adopt other people and consider them as extended family. Favorite childhood memory, learning to walk. It was so different from crawling. Now if I could only learn to fly. First job, cleaning up the floor and then learning to work with flowers in a florist shop. Worst job, I don't remember any bad ones. Last book I read. I love books and read them in herds. Last week, Forensic Neuropathology, a great book, but limited readership. Bardo Thadal, wide readership, but most of us are probably still confused. And Storming Heaven, which was a fascinating history, but I would add that readers should be careful of the implicit advice. Favorite music, folk music, and anything I can sing with. Favorite food. I am an omnivore and don't play favorites. My physique reflects my attitude. My idea of a perfect evening is flopping somewhere with a book or a craft project. My most irrational fear, becoming a roadkill, euphemistically called a traffic fatality. Considering statistics, I'm not sure this is irrational. I try very hard to hide the fact that I've always maintained a few obvious faults so people won't go after truly treasured idiosyncrasies, but I don't remember hiding anything. If there's one thing I can't stand in people, it is disavowal of personal responsibility and a related subject, the arrogance of ignorance. If I could change one thing about myself, it would be my species. As that seems unlikely in the near future, I may settle for a reduction in my size. In high school, everybody thought that I was frightening. Subsequent events have altered their attitude only a little. I've never been able to restrain my sense of humor. I hope I never have to become an administrator. The one thing I'd still like to try is living in the ocean. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it is to laugh at myself, be honest with myself, and try to do my best for patients and friends. The best advice I ever got was given to me by my father. He told us and showed us how to reach for the stars, both in this world and beyond it. My most embarrassing moment. I don't recall any embarrassing moments. Hysterically funny ones, crazy ones, yes, but embarrassing, no. Best time in my life. Whenever I find a serious-looking situation that turns out to be benign and the patient escapes. Worst time in my life. When I looked death in the face, it was valuable in the end as it permanently changed my priorities. Best idea I ever had. To give life the best shot I had and stick to it. I really worked to keep this in mind on particularly bad or grim days. Worst idea I ever had. To use a shaving razor to shape my eyebrows and to cut the loose hair strands always sticking out of my hairdo. Neither technique worked. The career I fantasize having is becoming an oceanographic explorer, but failing in that, I'd like to run a booth at the Yankee Peddler Craft Festival. And people would be surprised to know that I am basically shy and reclusive and that I have an intense dislike for telephones. I wanted to thank Andrew and Logan Harper for recording the songs that you've heard. They came and sang to Leslie while she was here at the Truman House. While cleaning out her house, I found a letter she wrote to me. She thought she was dying. This is the end of her letter. If you must make the stone to mark my place of rest, I wish to say. Think of me when you feel the wind on your cheek, free at last, just out of sight. Leslie will be buried in our plot on Martha's Vineyard with a quartz boulder engraved with those words.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has like the first morning, bird has spoken, like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word.
I just want to say that what what Logan just sang was Leslie's favorite hymn. We were at the Wilderness Center for an Easter sunrise service, and there were only old people there, croaky voices singing, and Leslie began singing. That was another talent of hers. Beautiful, clear, pure soprano voice. And when she was finished, everyone just looked and applauded and told her how beautiful her voice was. But that's a favorite hymn of hers.
What is legacy? I asked myself that, and I thought that's pretty diverse of a question. So I went to where everyone does today, Google. And I asked, what is legacy? Well, Google gave me 3 definitions of legacy. It said that it's leaving a name. It also said that it's leaving a great sum of money. Or the third definition, which was really kind of pondering to me, was going to a college because of a family legacy. So I thought a little bit more, and I Googled it a little bit deeper, and I said more about legacy, and it listed the 5 people that have left the biggest legacy in the world. People like Albert Einstein, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, all great people with great legacies. But I am convinced that legacy is more than that. It's not about leaving something unless those that you have left it to do something with the legacy. You see, I believe that we can talk all about the things that Dr. Harrold has left to us, but it's worthless unless we do something with the legacy that she has left to us. Over the years, Dr. Harrold and I have had many discussions. I would even say we've had some great debates about Scripture. Beginning back in 2009, when she started having all of her heart issues, for some reason she would let me come into her hospital room. She would always welcome me with a smile. We would talk, and we would sit and we would talk about Scripture. Sometimes she would agree with me, sometimes she would debate with me. I too remember the days back on 3rd Street in Dover when our offices were so small that you couldn't turn around without hitting 6 people in that office. And oftentimes I would be on the phone with a patient or their family talking to them, and I would hear one of Dr. Harrold's explosions. Let me tell you, she taught me some words that you could string together. I think I've taught those to my boys a couple of times as well. I know that Dr. Harrold would not want me to preach a sermon today. In fact, she would tell me that. But I also know that she would want me to share what is on my heart. I want to read to you a passage of Scripture that's very uncommon at a moment like this. But I think it's very common for Dr. Harrold. It comes from John chapter 13. Here is what John records. It was the day before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God, and he was returning from God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped the towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into the basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not know now what I am going to do, but later you will understand." "No," Peter replied, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part of me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you," for he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" He asked them. "You have called me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set for you an example that you shall now do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who has sent him. Now that you know these things, listen to these words. You will be blessed if you do them." Dr. Harrold always gave to others. We have heard some wonderful examples from her life of how she gave and served those around her. Her efforts and wisdom have been imprinted in the hearts and the minds of many people. She helped mentor so many. She taught everyone she came into contact with. And I would echo that we sit here today because of her. Community hospice would not be what it is today without Dr. Leslie Harrold. And we will continue to meet the needs of hurting people for generations to come, because that's what Dr. Harrold told us to do. I am convinced that Dr. Harrold has left a gigantic legacy. But here is my challenge. For her to have left that legacy, we must do those things too. We must continue to live the life that she taught us. Do you remember back about an hour ago when I began? The little story that hung in her office at Union Hospital of two wolves. Let us feed that good wolf. Let us remember that one person, no matter what they are, can change people around them when we live the legacy that Dr. Leslie Harrold left to us. She always taught. She always gave. She was always the first to be willing to say, "You can do this." We should be like her and do that as well. Will you pray with me? God, in these moments, we thank you for Dr. Harrold and her life. We thank you for the memories that could go on endlessly and be shared about all that she has done, how she has touched. and how she has challenged us. I am convinced that everyone that is sitting in this pavilion today and those that will watch this on YouTube later on will forever say that they are a better person because Dr. Harrold was a part of their life. I pray that we will remember her, that the tears will not flow, but that the smiles and the laughter will continue on. Father, thank you for these moments that we could remember her. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. I know that there are many more stories that could be shared about Dr. Harrold and her life, and we want to invite you to continue to be able to share those stories. There have been some box lunches that have been prepared. You're invited to grab one of those box lunches, sit around the tables or in the chairs, and continue to share those stories. If you have to leave, we still would love for you to take one of the box lunches and continue to remember her. Dr. Harrold had one request at the end of her service, that this final blessing be given. It is called the Apache blessing, and we will end with this, and then as the music plays, you may go from this place to the next. The writer says, "May the sun bring you new energy by day. May the moon softly restore you by night. May the rain wash away all of your worries, and the breeze blow new strength into your being. May you walk gently through the world and know its beauty all the days of your life. May you be blessed as you remember Dr. Leslie Harrold and all that she did."